Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Daily Deuce. I'm Gary Graves from just outside lovely Louisville, Kentucky, and in Maryland, my good friend and esteemed colleague, John Webster. John, how are you this lovely day?
Hey, Gary, doing great. Watched lot of good sports this weekend. Had a beautiful Father's Day weekend with my kids and my wife. And my wife, Kim, let's give her a belated shout out for a happy birthday to her.
Oh, yeah. Happy birthday,
Kim Webster.
Yeah, man, another birthday. I hope
birthday.
I hope you took her out to a nice restaurant or did something nice for her. You probably whipped up one of your special meals, right?
We went to a nice restaurant, had a great time. JR was going to be out of town for work, so we did the birthday and Father's Day together on Friday. Unbelievably, had a great time. It always great to be around Kim and JR and Dante. Have a great time with that. And later on, we're going to talk about a book that Kim gave me. Well, the family gave me for Father's Day. Very, very interesting. We're going to talk about it at the end of the show, Gary.
I look forward to it because any book, when you talk about a book, I know it's near and dear to your heart, and I'm always curious about that.
It absolutely is. But Gary, before we get too far, we both are being remiss. What have we not done?
Yep.
John Pitt, our traffic cop, our producer, our director. How you doing, my friend?
I'm tired, man. After the Celtics loss, I had to celebrate. So between Caribbean American Heritage Month, the Juneteenth celebrations I went to, my friend's Father's Day hangout, and I missed Kim's birthday, unfortunately. Happy birthday, Kim. I'm exhausted, man. I'm exhausted. Yeah. But it helped me get over that loss there.
Yeah. I think I forgot a birthday, John. When your mother-in-law's birthday was this weekend too, right?
Kim and her mother share the same birthday. Happy birthday to Miss Christmas as well.
That's right. Happy birthday, Sister Christmas.
Yes.
One of those women who raised me in the church. Yeah.
Good stuff. All good stuff.
So anyway, how are you dealing with the loss, John? The Boston loss. How are you dealing with it?
Hey, look, I'm gonna tell you like this. Boston fan, yes, I am. But don't feel bad with them losing to Golden State. Better team won. It's one of those things, and I think Gary has some points he wants us to hit on. So I'm going to save some of my other comments for when Mr. Graves gets us going.
Yeah, well, it's like this. Now, it's like I picked Golden State, but I was rooting for Boston because it's just for a whole lot of reasons. I like to kind of look at these up and coming teams. And, again, when you're a team like Boston, well, any NBA team that doesn't have the pedigree of Golden State, you got to take that window when you have it. And it seemed like this was Boston's window. In fact, it was Boston's window through three quarters in Game 5. They lost it. They lost that game. They got off to a good start in Game 6, and then they lost it just as fast. I mean, I've never seen such a turnaround in the first quarter, John. I think we're talking about something like a 21-point turnaround, and they just never really got it back. And it was a team, I'm not going to say that they were physically tired, but I think they were just emotionally beat after that third quarter. When Golden State came back in the fourth quarter of Game 5, I said, this is probably one of those series that, they might have a game at home, but they're going to have a hard time getting over letting that one slip away. And then, it was pretty much a wrap after the first quarter in Game 6. And kudos to the Golden State Warriors. In the media, we're so quick to deify teams as a dynasty. I think that Golden State obviously qualifies. I don't think anybody now should dispute Stephen Curry's credentials as an all-time great. I mean, I think he was already there, but now we can have him in that conversation among the greatest players of all time. And I'm talking about, we're talking about a top 10. I think he's moved into that by getting a finals MVP, which I think was like the last thing to check off his list. I think his legacy is pretty much set. With the rest of that team, the way that it's stocked, and I think one of the topics that we're going to touch upon is free agency. Especially with Jordan Poole. But the thing I liked about Golden State's win, even though I was rooting for the Celtics, is I had hoped that they would get back there at least one more time, especially after all the injuries in 2019. When was it 2019 or when they lost to Toronto, that I had hoped they would get back there, because I thought this team was still young enough. The core was still intact. They still had the contracts. They just had to get through just a ridiculous spate of injuries, rather, and they got there. And I think this title might have been probably the most impressive, because it's one thing when you're a team on the way up, but when you get there and then teams start chipping away at your plateau, at the pedestal that you're on, i.e. Toronto, Memphis, last season. And I won't get into the whole thing with Golden State and John Moran on that one. That's, I'll leave that one for social media. But I really felt good for them that they got back to the pinnacle, because that just showed the kind of staying power that Steph, Clay, Draymond Green, Steve Kerr as a coach, how they were able to keep that core intact and then bring in a whole bunch of players in the meantime, even through the injuries, and really sustain and build that depth that carried them to another title.
Hey, Gary, you said a mouthful. Let me first start with Boston. They played, they had a very good season. Everybody wants to win a championship. There's always only one team that's going to be smiling in the end. I don't care what sport you're playing. But I don't think they have anything to be ashamed of. They do have things they need to work on. You and I have talked about the whole year about the 3-point shot as opposed to driving to the basket and getting a 2-point shot. I think that played a role in them not winning. I also think they got to work on the turnovers. There are some that believe they need a point guard. There are some that aren't really fans of Marcus Smart. I am a fan of Marcus Smart. He's, like I've always said, he's a Celtic from the old days. Love the guy. But I do believe sometimes he may need to look for the pass as opposed to himself taking that big shot. He's not scared to take it, which is good, but he needs to look at getting his other players involved. Jason Tatum, absolutely great player, but I still say you drive to the basket, get fouled, and get to the foul line. Jaylen Brown, love the guy. Love how he plays. Love his energy. Love everything about him every week. Now over to that juggernaut called the Golden State Warriors. All you can do is say congratulations to them. Give them a big standing ovation. They did it. For 2 years, one of the years they had the worst record in the NBA. That's how they ended up getting James Wiseman. Last year, they lost to try to get into the play-in game. They couldn't even get to the play-in game. Memphis took them out. And you mentioned in Memphis, I think Memphis and Golden State is going to become a very interesting, competitive, and heated rivalry over the next few years. I think also with Golden State, they're going to have to make some decisions about players. Jordan Poole, you mentioned, he's going to want some money. Andrew Wiggins is going to want some money. I'm going to say this to you, Gary, and to you too, John Pitt. There's Batman and there's Robin. There's the Green Hornet and there's Kato. Andrew Wiggins and Jordan Poole want to get money and get paid as if they're the Green Hornet and they're Batman. I'm here to say to you, both of them played very well. I really like what they did, but they are Robin and the Green Hornet. You put them on a team where they have to be like Steph and be the man, it takes a lot. I always say this to Dante, know your role and know what you're good at. Gary, you've seen many guys where they get a free agent deal and they want the money and they go from playing in Poughkeepsie, Kansas, to all of a sudden want to play in New York City, and the bright lights are too much for them. They're not used to that. Understand what you are. Andrew Wiggins had a great season, became an all-star. But what option was he, Gary?
He was
Not
like
the
the fourth.
first.
He was still their fourth option.
Not
Maybe
the second.
even their, he might have been their fifth option.
You always now Draymond Green is the fifth because Draymond Green refuses to shoot. So he has to be the fifth option. But he was probably the fourth option. And guess what happened with him being a fourth option? He played well. He shut down Jason Tatum. Unbelievable. He did a lot of great things, but he was the fourth option. Less pressure on you. There's a guy named Steph Curry that got the pressure, and he can handle it. Nothing wrong with realizing what you are. Nothing wrong with realizing where your role is. Something wrong with thinking that your role is bigger than what your britches are. He needs to really think. Jordan Poole really needs to think.
Yeah.
I'm hearing rumors already. Sacramento wants Jordan Poole. Well, you know that because Mike Brown's over there. That's why they want him. You're going to put him in the backcourt with De'Aaron, Day'Ron, whatever, Fox. They still won't make the playoffs. They'll still be Sacramento. So,
yeah, it's here's my thing. When I love your analogies of Cato and the Green Hornet and that kind of thing, and Robin. I think Golden State, they have to figure out what Golden State is essentially is the Justice League, and you have to figure out how to keep the Justice League together. I think they're going to face some hard decisions. They might have to restructure a couple of contracts. Where two of them are. I don't know if they'll do that because, like you said, they want to get paid. But again, while you still have this window with this squad, you try to keep it together because again, they proved more to me as a team this year than the teams when they had KD. And to your point about, some guys want to be the man or whatever, we're seeing that KD isn't necessarily the man in New Jersey. And he's going to face an even tougher.
Oh, Gary, you're going hard, man. That's rough. What you just said, Gary. Woo, that's rough.
Kevin Durant is who he is, but John, his comfort zone is when he's got a supporting cast around him where he doesn't feel like he has to do it all. Can we say that? Can we at least say that?
Hey, Gary, I just say this to you. My good friend Gary Graves, you just came strong to the mic, man. I'm not trying to throw dirt on KD by any stretch, but again, it's like I saw a meme out there where Draymond Green was supposedly yelling at him. It's like, hey, we won without you. We didn't need you or anything else like that. KD is the man in New Jersey in terms of, he is the face of that franchise. But if Kyrie Irving leaves via free agency or trade or whatever method or whatever, and the spotlight is solely on him, how will he respond? That's the question, John. Don't you think? Well, Gary, I'm going to tell you this. That's a very fair question, a very fair statement, because I'm going to give you another analogy since you like my analogy so much. I'm going to give you another one.
I love superheroes.
But I'm going to go a different route now. I'm going to show you a different side now. No superhero now. Kevin Durant. The question is, what came first, the chicken or the egg? So is he somebody that can carry them? Does he drive a bus or does he get a seat on the bus? Which is it? And you, my friend, you're saying he gets a seat because he's going to need somebody to drive it.
He might have thought he wanted to drive it, but he might just want a seat. That's all I'm saying. It's like he probably thought he could drive a clutch and then realized, I'm better off driving an automatic.
Well, that's a fair statement. Something to think about. Because in Golden State, They won 2 with him. But, you know, there are some that believe they would have won 2 even if he wasn't there. Some that believe they won the 2 because he was there. You know, that's a hard one because I still think Durant is one of the best players around. I saw something yesterday. It was meant as a compliment, but at the same time, I'm not sure it's a compliment to Durant. I saw a piece about him, and they were comparing him to the Iceman, George Gervin. And I'm not sure that that's really a compliment. Let me tell you why. The Iceman was one of the best, simply one of the best. Could do a finger roll from the lane, could do it all. But the Iceman never won a championship. So, as you're talking about George Gervin and you're comparing him to Kevin Durant, are you also trying to label both of them as, you know, Durant has 2 championships. Gervin doesn't have 2. Gervin played with some good teams. He played in an era against a guy. I don't know if you're familiar with this guy, Gary. He played against a guy. One was named Johnson, and the other one was named Jabbar. So with the Lakers. So
and Elvin Hayes too. Remember
and,
that
and
that matchup.
Take it back because for a while they were in the East and they ran across a team called the Bullets, and they lost to a guy named Dandridge. They couldn't do anything with Dandridge. Remember, that was the year the Bullets won the championship. So
late season
Gervin,
pickup.
Yeah, Gervin, you know, is a very good player. Very good player. I don't take anything from him. I think he's one of the best. But the comparisons they make with him and Durant, you wonder where they're going with it. You wonder where.
Yeah. But John, let's shift to college football a little bit. And particularly with HBCUs. Well, specifically Deion Sanders. He, his son, and one another defensive player, you know, considered probably one of the top players of last year's class on the cover of Sports Illustrated. I've only read snippets of the article itself, you know, where he talks about his commitment, or, you know, his deal to really elevate HBCUs back into that profile where the scouts are coming to see, you know, not just his players. I mean, I think he obviously has a proprietary interest in Jackson State, but that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats, he's trying to apply that to HBCUs in general, which I really do applaud. You can say whatever about him, you know, being prime time and wanting the spotlight, but he really is doing the work, I believe, in trying to raise or restore the profile of HBCUs. And I think it's having an effect. For him, and again, I haven't had a chance to read the article, but I think the thing that he's real effective at with this is reminding some of these teams that not all the talent is at Alabama or Ohio State or any other Power 5 school for that matter. That, you know, it might be these guys, to be sure, you know, the defensive player who got the NIL deal, that guy is gonna be a first round draft pick, if not in another year, at least a couple of years. And you have to really give it to him for the recruiting coup that he pulled in getting him there, and now getting some of the other guys. Because if you look around college football, there are other blue chip players that are looking at HBCUs. The profile is smaller, of course, you know, compared to Power 5, but in terms of the grooming that they can get at HBCUs, the fact that, you know, I mean, they can play against guys not only that look like them, but they can play in a different culture where they don't feel like fish out of water. That's the thing that I always appreciated about HBCUs, reading about the story about players in HBCUs, that in an era where, you know, like guys like the Larry Littles, you know, we're getting attention from the NFL, but in terms of really getting the college experience, you know, being students and understanding their importance to the team and the community, you really can't beat an HBCU. And I think that's the thing that he's trying to restore. At the same time, he's also trying to lift the profiles where they can make a little money off their name, image, and likeness. And that's the thing too. You have to really applaud him for that. I know that's a lot that I said a mouthful, but I'm gonna get your take on it.
Hey, Gary, that's great. I always love your take on things, man, and it always helps me think my way through what I'm going to say next. And I applaud Deion Sanders, Coach Prime. I think he's doing a magnificent job at Jackson State. I go back to when I was a kid. I know that was probably a long time ago. I know John Pitt saying, you're old as dirt, John. I know that. But
I'm older.
My dad, remember my dad would take me when I used to live in Salisbury. He would take me to Maryland State football games, and I would go to Morgan State games. I saw Delaware State play, and I enjoyed watching HBCU football. One of the things that happened to HBCUs and the football, when you think back, the Willard Laniers came from there, Walter Paytons came from there, the Otis Taylors came from there, the Buck Buchanans, the Ernie Ladds, Doug Williams, James Harris, the list goes on and on. But one of the things that happened is when you desegregated the schools, a lot of the Black kids saw an opportunity to get to more of the majority schools and did not go. Instead of going to North Carolina A&T or North Carolina Central, they went to North Carolina State. Instead of going to Maryland State, they went to Maryland. Instead of going to Virginia Union, they went to Virginia Tech or Virginia. Instead of going to Grambling, they went to LSU. It changed the landscape for many years. I think one of the things, and I'm all for a kid going to whatever school they can get in, but I think that hurt the HBCUs, in my opinion, Gary. I think when the kids started being able to go to other majority schools, it took away from the HBCUs, the money, and the schools started losing their funding and didn't have as much money, and the program started going down. Maryland State ended up becoming Maryland Eastern Shore. They still don't have a football team. They lost their football team, I think, in 1979.
Yeah.
It changed a lot of things, man. You look at what Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, is doing. He's restoring that pride back into an HBCU. Also, you mentioned the NIL. I think that plays a very important role because now a kid can see, I don't have to go to Alabama or Auburn or USC to get an NIL. I can get one by playing at Jackson State, Alcorn State, Mississippi Valley, Prairie View, Morgan State. I can get it. And they're going to get it, and they're going to take advantage of it. I think there are some schools in the majority. I'm not going to go down that path a long way, Gary, but I think there are some schools in the majority who are fearing that and realizing that some of these kids will be able to go to HBCUs and do not need to go to a larger institution, a larger college or university to get that NIL. I will say this, though. This is the thing that scares me. For all the great things that Deion Sanders is doing, for all the great things he has provided for these kids, he's changed the way they think at Jackson State. Now that, he's got a training table for them. He also has suits they wear to the game. He's restored a different type of pride back into the program. And Eddie George, who now is going on to Tennessee State, bringing a different kind of pride back to the program. But I will say this, as much as these gentlemen do or have done, there will be some coaches who are going to be jealous of them and who are waiting to pounce on the opportunity to bring them down. And that's going to be sad because what these gentlemen are doing, in particular, Deion Sanders, he's doing something not just to help Jackson State. He's doing something not just to help the state of Mississippi or the SWAC conference, but HBCUs as a whole. He's bringing a lot to the table. That article was so great, Gary. I hope you get a chance to read it in Sports Illustrated. It talks about, how there was a school that had some problems with a field, and he saw it and he worked to help them get their field back in better shape. This is a guy that's not just concentrating on himself or his school. He's looking at the broad, big picture. And I applaud him. I love what Deion Sanders is doing. And I hope he continues to be able to do it. And I hope the coaches will all continue to support him. But you know as well as I do in life, Gary, there's always somebody that's going to be jealous. There's always going to be somebody that's going to want to pull you down. And they'll find some type of way to make that happen. I hope and pray it doesn't, because this guy at Jackson State who calls himself Coach Prime is definitely a prime time player.
Yeah. What Deion, or excuse me, what the other coaches have to understand about Deion Sanders, about Coach Prime and Eddie George, is we're all in this together. And again, I like to use that, rising tide metaphor, because I do think there's a benefit there. In the same way that back in the day, like when I covered Howard and Willie Jeffries was there, then, Steve Wilson was there. And, and of course, none other than Mr. Robinson, Coach Robinson, that at Grambling, that those names, but particularly with Eddie Robinson at Grambling, who brought untold amount of attention and a profile, no matter how well they perform. That luster has been lost for all the things that you mentioned. But I think with those two names in particular, and they seem committed to the goal of really not just trying to win on the field, but help other HBCUs win. And a thing that they talk about is it's not just about getting talent, but getting those other schools to really invest in their programs. It's like, it's one thing to have a great band. It's one thing to have a football team, but if you have a successful program to go along with a great band and stuff, that, look, it becomes an experience, much like in basketball with the CIAA tournament, probably one of the best postseason tournaments you will ever attend. I mean, I've covered a couple of MEAC tournaments, and I've been to the CIAA. That isn't just basketball. That's an event. That is a festival. And that's a thing that I think really, again, keeps athletes interested in HBCUs. And I'd like to see that, restored back in football. All right, John, let's talk about the nation's pastime. Actually, in the nation's pastime in the nation's capital, and just up the road in Baltimore. You're having a better year with your team than I'm having with my Nationals. The Orioles, I have to give it to them. They got to 30 wins after 68 games, whereas I saw a chart where the last couple, I guess going back maybe about 4 years, where they didn't get to 30 wins until their 92nd game, their 112th game, and here they are. They're still in last place, but you see a team that's like less than 10 games under 500, which is really something to behold, because there probably isn't a person other than John Webster that can name any player on the Baltimore Orioles roster.
Well, Gary, I think if I pressed you hard enough, you could name a couple. I think you could, but I'm not going to press you right now, Gary. I'm not doing that. But they're playing a lot better this year, Gary. Still, I'm not totally happy, because as they're playing better, their defense is not as good as it usually is the last 2 years. They're getting more hitting. They're getting more home runs. The pitching has improved. Jorge Lopez has really become a consistent closer. Ryan Mountcastle is playing first base with him and Mancini, and they're doing a good job. The outfield, your Austin Hayes is hitting 290 something this year. He's really doing a good job. The center fielder, which is Mullins, started off slow, but he's starting to pick up, and he's leading the team in steals. He's definitely a threat. He scares the bejeebers out of you when he's on base. You don't know when he's going to go, and he has the green light anytime he can go. Just brought up the catcher. He was #1 pick, Adley Rushman, hit his first home run last week, so we'll see. Just went through a series with Tampa Bay. They won 2 out of 3, which is really good because when they were down in Florida against Tampa Bay last week, they took 2 out of 3 from them. So no, maybe it was 2-2. No, I think it was 2 out of 3.
Yeah,
So I'm really pleased with them. I really want to be in first place, Gary. You know that. Can't be in first place. They play the Nats tonight. We start the Beltway series for 2 games up in Camden Yards. We'll see what's going to happen. Tonight, I think we have Jordan Lyles. Yeah, Jordan Lyles is on the mound tonight. 4-5, about a 5 ERA. So we'll see if we can get like 5 innings out of him. Then we go to the bullpen. You got Batista that comes in, 6'7" flamethrower. You got Dylan Tate comes in. They it's a good team, man. It's a good team, man. Now go ahead. Yeah. Let's talk about the Nats. You name some players of Nats. Strasburg, David Martinez,
a former player. He's on the shelf again. And for what it's worth, John, I really think his career is done.
Gary, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you like I told Dante. You know what I think he can do?
Coach?
Dennis Eckersley. I think he can be Dennis Eckersley. He's not a starting pitcher anymore. Not a starting pitcher. But you remember Dennis Eckersley? They thought his career was over, and they moved into the bullpen with the A's and then with the St. Louis Cardinals, I think. And he was one of the best closers ever. I think you can do the same thing with Strasburg. I don't think he can be a starting pitcher anymore, but I don't think his career is over. I think he will be a lights out closer. I really believe that. Now you go tell the learners what I said. You go tell the learners I said that.
Well, I think you just did, or at least Rizzo, the general manager. The thing with the Nats, they're in a tough position. I think. Okay, before I talk about the Nats, I'm going to say this about the Orioles. All along, all we've wanted to see was some kind of growth. I mean, they're not that far removed from being a wild card team. I think the last time they were in the playoffs, didn't they win a division? I mean, granted, it was kind of a weak division, but
last time the Orioles were in the playoffs was as a wild card, and it was like the one game playoff. They lost to Toronto in extra.
Yeah, that was 2016, 2017, something like that. So they're not really that far removed. But of course, what often happens is that they start losing. Yeah, they lose players in free agency. Manny Machado's playing in San Diego now. I think he's still playing in San Diego. Last I checked. But with the Nats, we're in a similar situation. The pandemic really killed that team's buzz in a lot of ways. They didn't really get a chance to properly celebrate their title with no fans at the games that the year after their World Series. That really hurt. And then they reached the push, came to shove part last season where they had to start unloading players. Half went to LA. Max Scherzer is now in New York after playing with the Dodgers last year. Rendon was gone after the World Series. The biggest thing with the Nats right now, for them to have any chance of gaining respectability, I don't think it's going to happen, but they're going to have to try to re-sign Juan Soto. If you can't re-sign him, you need to ship him for prospects now, because otherwise it's going to get really ugly. And John, when it gets really ugly, that's when you start hearing the R word, as in relocation. And we already, we're hearing it about the Orioles. We're hearing it about the Tampa Bay Rays. And they're a successful team, but they've got a bad stadium. They have always had a bad stadium. You're hearing it about the Oakland A's. And I was a huge A's fan back in the Reggie Jackson days. But even back then, we're talking about 50 years, John. They play in a bad stadium. It is not a baseball stadium. I mean, the space between the foul line and the dugouts, you could almost play a football game on that stadium. Having said that, I used to love watching Raider games in that place back in the day. But again, baseball, and especially with two teams, and I guess you could call them small markets. Like, I never thought DC was a small market any more than Baltimore, but I know what you're talking about in terms of TV. DC is a top 10 market. They should be able to be competitive. The learners realized that, but then they also realized how much money they had tied up in contracts, which is why they couldn't re-sign Bryce Harper. I hope the Orioles become respectable. We've had our differences about that TV deal, and I really hold it against the Angeloses for really holding the Nats back on that deal. That's where the commissioner has to be the man and step up and settle this thing once and for all, because it is really holding both teams back. But for your sake, I want to see the Orioles become respectable. For my sake, I want to see the Nats get back to being somewhat close to respectable, instead of looking like a 100-loss team that they appear to be headed for this year.
Well, thank you for those kind words, Gary. I know we got to go to wrap up. I'll just say this one thing before we go to wrap up. You signed the deal. Now go ahead and go to wrap up, Gary.
Well, they had no choice, John, but to sign that deal if they were going to come to DC. And daggone well, the Orioles were holding the cards, because the indemnification of moving a team into that market. The Orioles realized that whole thing about the DC, how DC, they were losing that market, was vastly overrated. Vastly overrated, John. I'm going to say it. You put a good product on a team, yeah, you'll draw from DC and Maryland, but mainly you have to draw from Baltimore. That's all I'm going to say. Nobody held a gun to their head, but in a sense, they almost did, because that was the only way they were going to be able to move from Montreal to Washington. And Major League Baseball knew that.
Gary, I see sweat beads coming from your brow. Go ahead and take us to wrap up.
Anyway, no. Hey, it's been another great week in sports. There was so much that we could have talked about, but didn't. But again, as we move on, there's plenty of auto racing. There's plenty of hockey. We still got the Stanley Cup going on. There's golf. There's Wimbledon coming up, all those tournaments. But look, we even got sports to talk about in the state of Maryland. And for that, I'm going to throw it over to John.
Hey, thanks, Gary. Like I said in the beginning of the show, had a great Father's Day and birthday with my wife. And one of the gifts the Webster family gave me for Father's Day gift was a book called High School Basketball on Maryland's Eastern Shore. It is a must-read book written by Mitchell Northam. I have not been able to put it down. And guess what, Gary? Guess what? Talked to Mitchell Northam today via LinkedIn and has agreed to come on the Daily Deuce in the future. I'm excited, man. I'm absolutely excited. This book has a history of basketball on the Eastern Shore, goes all the way back to the 50s, maybe a little bit further back, and all the way up to 2021. Great stories, great stories, and even talks about the Black high schools they had back in the 50s and 60s. Somerset High School, Macy's Lane, Salisbury High School, Moulton High School, and Worcester High School, to name some of them. Great read. I tell my friends on the Eastern Shore, Broderick Nutter, John Putt Johnson, tell your friends and make sure you get this book. Excellent read. I'm going back to you, Gary. Take us home.
All right. Hey, it's been fun, folks. We'll see you next week. I know we'll have a whole lot to talk about. And, again, even if we don't agree, we are still friends at the end of this. Tell your friends, tell your family. We're on Facebook. Look for us on YouTube. John, you have the last word.
Thanks for being, Gary. Another great week, another great time talking about sports to my dear, great friend, Gary Graves. You all have a good time. Watch some sports. Watch the Orioles beat the Nats this week. We'll talk to you real soon. Take care.
In your dreams, anyway.